Before the United States existed, before any European had ever seen it, Alaska was already ancient. It had been home to some of the most resilient, ingenious, and enduring peoples on the face of the earth for over 10,000 years. The first humans arrived in Alaska during the last ice age, crossing a vast land bridge connecting Asia and North America. This land bridge, known as Beringia, stretched hundreds of miles wide and was a world unto itself. Over millennia, these early migrants spread southward and eastward, populating 2 entire continents. But many stayed, and from them grew the diverse native nations of Alaska. The Yupik people settled across the vast wetlands of western Alaska, building a culture centered on the sea and the salmon. The Inupiat thrived along the Arctic coast, hunting bowhead whales from skin boats called umiaks in freezing, churning waters. The Athabascan nation spread across the immense interior, following the caribou and reading the forest like a living map. Along the rugged southeastern coast, the Tlingit forged one of the most sophisticated cultures in the Western Hemisphere. Their towering totem poles were not merely art, they were libraries, recording family histories, clan rites, and spiritual stories. The Haida and Tsimshian also called this coastline home, masters of the sea and of breathtaking artistic tradition. The Aleutian people, known as Unangan, inhabited the long chain of islands stretching westward into the Pacific, expert ocean navigators. These were not primitive societies, they were complex, sovereign nations with rich languages, governance systems, and spiritual lives. For thousands of years they adapted, survived, and flourished in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Then, from the west, came strangers with ships. In 1741, the Russian Empire launched one of the greatest exploratory voyages of the 18th century. Vitus Bering, a Danish navigator sailing under the Russian flag, commanded an expedition into the uncharted North Pacific. On July 16, 1741, his ship, the St. Peter, sighted the towering peaks of the Alaskan mainland for the first time. Bering never returned home. He died of scurvy on a desolate island now bearing his name. But his crew brought back something that would change Alaska forever: sea otter pelts. The furs were extraordinarily valuable in China, and Russian merchants called Permafrost flooded into Alaskan waters. They enslaved and terrorized the Unangan people, forcing them to hunt at gunpoint under brutal conditions. Entire communities were wiped out, not just by violence, but by disease against which the native people had no immunity. By the late 18th century, the Russian-American company had established a monopoly over Alaska's resources. In 1799, Sitka, then called Novo-Arkhangelsk, became the capital of Russian Alaska on the southeastern coast. The Tlingit resisted fiercely, and in 1802, they destroyed the Russian fort at Sitka in a stunning assault. The Russians returned with cannons 2 years later and recaptured the site, but the Tlingit never surrendered their spirit. Russian Orthodox missionaries followed the traders, and their faith took deep root among Alaskan native communities. By the mid-19th century, however, Russia's hold on Alaska was weakening. The Crimean War had drained the Russian treasury and exposed the vulnerability of distant colonial holdings. Tsar Alexander II feared that Britain might seize Alaska in a future conflict, making it worthless to Russia. In a secret negotiation conducted in a single night in Washington, Russia offered to sell Alaska to the United States. Secretary of State William H. Seward eagerly accepted, signing the Treaty of Cession on March 30, 1867. The price was $7.2 million, less than 2 cents per acre, for nearly 600,000 square miles of land. Many Americans mocked the deal, calling it Seward's folly and Seward's icebox, convinced it was worthless frozen wilderness. The transfer ceremony took place in Sitka on October 18, 1867, as the Russian flag was lowered and the American flag raised. For Alaska's native peoples, it was simply the change of one colonial master for another. The United States, preoccupied with Reconstruction after the Civil War, largely ignored its new territory. For 2 decades, Alaska had almost no civil government. It was essentially an unorganized territory. But nature had other plans, and in 1880, everything changed with a single glittering discovery. Joe Juneau and Richard Harris, guided by the Tlingit leader Coe, discovered gold at the base of a mountain. The town of Juneau was born almost overnight, becoming the first gold rush town in Alaska. But it was only a prelude to what was coming. In 1896, gold was discovered in Canada's Yukon Territory, just across Alaska's border. When the news reached the outside world in 1897, it detonated one of the greatest human stampedes in history. 100,000 people raced toward Alaska, flooding into Skagway and Haida on the southeastern coast. They faced the brutal Chilkoot Pass, a near-vertical mountain wall that had to be climbed carrying hundreds of pounds of supplies. The Canadian Mounties required each person to bring a full ton of supplies, so the climb had to be made over and over again. Sobey Smith, a cunning criminal mastermind, turned Skagway into a den of fraud, robbery, and murder. He was eventually shot dead in a confrontation on a Skagway dock, a legend born and ended in the same wild summer. Most of the gold seekers never struck it rich, but Alaska itself was transformed by the rush. Towns, roads, and telegraph lines appeared where there had been only wilderness. In 1906, Juneau officially became the capital of Alaska Territory, replacing Sitka. The early 20th century brought new industries to feed an increasingly hungry nation. Alaska's salmon runs were among the richest on Earth, and canneries stretched along hundreds of miles of coastline. Copper mining boomed in the Wrangell Mountains, and the Kennecott mine became one of the richest copper deposits ever found. The railroad pushed inland from Seward, reaching Fairbanks by 1923, when President Warren Harding drove the Golden Spike. Then came the Second World War, and Alaska was suddenly no longer remote. It was a front line. In June 1942, Japanese forces bombed Dutch Harbor and invaded the islands of Attu and Kiska in the Aleutian chain. It was the only occupation of American soil during World War II, and it sent shockwaves across the nation. The Battle of Attu in May 1943 was one of the bloodiest island fights of the Pacific War. Nearly all of the Japanese garrison of 2,600 men died, rather than surrender, many in a final desperate banzai charge. The Aleutian Unangan people were evacuated by the U.S. government to internment camps in southeast Alaska, a dark, forgotten chapter. The military built the legendary Alaska Highway, 1,500 miles of road punched through wilderness in under 9 months. After the war, Alaska's strategic importance as a Cold War outpost kept military investment and population growing. Alaskans had been pushing for statehood for decades, frustrated by their lack of representation in Congress. The fight was long and complicated. Fishing industry lobbyists, federal bureaucrats, and political opponents stood in the way. But Alaskans voted overwhelmingly for statehood in 1956, sending a powerful message to Washington. On January 3, 1959, President Dwight D. joining Washington's side, Eisenhower signed the proclamation making Alaska the 49th state of the Union. Alaska was the first new state in 47 years, and by far the largest in the nation, bigger than Texas, California, and Montana combined. Then on Good Friday, March 27, 1964, the Earth itself unleashed something terrifying. The Great Alaska Earthquake struck with a magnitude of 9.2, the most powerful earthquake ever recorded in North American history. Anchorage's streets buckled and collapsed. Tsunamis destroyed coastal towns, and 139 people lost their lives. The quake reshaped coastlines, lifted some land areas by 30 feet, and dropped others into the sea. Alaska rebuilt, and within a decade it would discover the resource that would redefine its future entirely. In 1968, geologists confirmed a massive oil field beneath Prudhoe Bay on Alaska's Arctic North Slope. It was the largest oil field ever found in North America, holding an estimated 10 billion barrels. But getting that oil to market required one of the greatest engineering feats of the 20th century. The Trans-Alaska Pipeline, 800 miles long, crossing 3 mountain ranges and hundreds of rivers, was built between 1974 and 1977. On June 20th, 1977, oil began flowing south from Prudhoe Bay to the port of Valdez. The oil boom transformed Alaska's economy and created the Permanent Fund, a savings account that pays dividends to every Alaskan resident. Then on March 24, 1989, disaster struck the pristine waters of Prince William Sound. The Exxon Valdez oil tanker ran aground on Bligh Reef, spilling nearly 11 million gallons of crude oil. 11,000 miles of coastline were fouled. Hundreds of thousands of animals died, and fishing communities were shattered. The disaster became a watershed moment in American environmental history, reshaping oil spill response laws permanently. In the decades since, Alaska has wrestled with enormous questions about its future. Climate change is warming the Arctic more than twice as fast as the rest of the planet, reshaping Alaska in real time. Ancient permafrost is thawing, destabilizing buildings and swallowing roads whole in remote native villages. Coastal communities like Shishmaref and Nutok are literally disappearing into the sea, forcing heartbreaking relocations. The Alaska Native people who have called this land home for 10 millennia are once again fighting for survival and sovereignty. Today, Alaska remains one of the most extraordinary places on the face of the earth. Its landscapes are almost incomprehensibly vast. Glaciers the size of states, rivers that run for 1,000 miles. Denali, the highest peak in North America at 20,310 feet, watches over it all in silent, eternal grandeur. More than 229 federally recognized Alaskan Native tribes maintain their languages, cultures, and claims on their ancestral lands. The fishing industry still sustains coastal communities, and Alaskan seafood reaches dinner tables across the world. Tourism draws hundreds of thousands of visitors each year to see glaciers, wildlife, and wilderness found nowhere else on Earth. The debates over oil drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge continue to define Alaska's political identity. Alaska is a place where ancient tradition and modern industry, wilderness and civilization, exist in constant, unresolved tension. It is a place that has been shaped by ice and fire, by greed and courage, by injustice and remarkable resilience. The story of Alaska is the story of humanity pushed to its absolute limits and enduring. From the first humans who crossed Beringia in an Ice Age dawn, to the communities fighting rising seas today, Alaska endures. Its past is complex, its present is urgent, and its future is one of the most consequential questions in American life. If this history moved you, share it, because Alaska's story is still being written, and it belongs to all of us.